Welcome to Demono's Pod with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
Going well. Looking forward to baseball season. Next couple weeks hearing from 49er fans is not going to be fun, but yeah, God bless them. I'm not going to steal their joy, but at the same time, I'm going to wear a Browns uniform to their parties. Have you
Um,
seen those memes going around where it says I was invited to the 49er party and it shows people wear the other uniforms?
yeah, I will celebrate in their demise when the Chiefs win. I can't stand the Niners as a Seahawks fan. So today we are covering our top 10 uh dynasty prospect shortstops. Shortstop is a loaded position historically. I think a lot of players are drafted as shortstops and move off of shortstop eventually. We try to project where we think that player will play the majority of their career. And so there are going to be shortstops that are on a lot of lists that may play shortstop for a year or two that we rank at other positions. But that said, we will give our top 10 shortstops today, debated as we always do. Does the Mariners jersey foreshadow one Felnin Celesten on your top 10 list?
Certainly, yes.
I love it. Me too. All right,
I have,
man.
I have,
So,
I,
so
this is going to be a controversial pod because I have some comments to make here.
I do too. So just for I guess the listener's sake, I should say straight out that Colson Montgomery I have as a third baseman, Adele Amador I have as a second baseman because I believe they're going to keep Tovar at short. I think Colson grows off of shortstop. I think he's going to become too big or too slow. And I have Luciano as a third baseman because I don't think he has I think he's too stiff to remain at short, and I think he's going to continue to bulk up. Also Jackson Merrill I have as a second baseman as well.
Mhm.
Who do you have on your list
I
or don't have on your list that are typically included in the shortstop rankings?
Yeah, so all those that you mentioned besides Merrill, because I didn't cover Merrill in the second base
Okay.
category. I do have one that probably is going to move, and that's Walcott, but
I have him
he's
too.
there listed now.
Mm-hmm.
I have one that was right on the border, but I wanted to put him on here right on the border as far as somebody who played last year and doesn't necessarily qualify. So I have Mason Wynn on my list.
Got it. Sweet. I do
So
too. I think Win is
all the other ones are pretty standard, I think.
I think Win is still considered a rookie, and so therefore I have him on the prospect list as well.
Good.
Let's get started. I don't think it's controversial. I assume we both have Jackson Holiday at one. Holiday is a top, I guess, number one for a lot of publications. You see him at two on occasion. I'm assuming he's your number one.
Absolutely, yeah. But he is not my number one for my overall list,
Got
and
it.
we'll get into that.
So Jackson Holiday, 20 years old. Everyone expects him to be, whether he makes the opening day squad with the Orioles or somewhere down the line, expect him to be up with Baltimore. Matt Holiday's son, for those old heads out there, played in A ball, high A, double A, and triple A in 2023. He hit 323, 442 with the 941 OPS. 12 homers, 24 steals, 17.4% walk rate, 20.3% K rate. He's just a hitter, man. I think he might be the first 70 hit that I've given. We've covered catcher, first base, second base, third base, and shortstop. And I'm going to double check here, but I believe he's the first 70 that I've given, as much as I love Tamar Johnson. Yep. So I give him a 70 hit, 60 power, 60 run, 55 field, and a 65 overall. He is my number one prospect. I think he's a really safe player. The one question is, does he remain at short? Does he move to second eventually? And I expect him to fill out. You look at his dad, and his dad was a pretty buff dude, right? Matt Holliday was not a small guy, and I think as time wears on, because we have the knowledge of what his dad looked like and played like, I think that we can push a little bit of that onto Jackson. I expect him to get bigger. And if he gets bigger, does he stay at short? But phenomenal player, left-handed hitter. Like I said, probably the best hit tool of anybody in my top 100. Super excited to see what he can do. I have his risk as low. Do you have anything to add with Jackson Holiday?
And does he shave yet?
Barely,
Pictures.
barely.
Um, as far as filling out, I think he's obviously one here. He's in my top four when it comes to overall. The question I have about him is he a extremely high 4-4 player, and where is his ceiling going to go?
Sure.
Especially when it comes to fantasy baseball. Is he one of those players that is kind of Jeter-esque in the sense that he's that number one prospect in real life?
Mhm.
But is he that high floor player in fantasy baseball and not necessarily that high ceiling player? I'm not confident that he can consistently be in the top 20 overall in the dynasty league. I think I'm confident he could be the top 5 in the position as players move out.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I have him at 70, 55, 55. I'm not convinced in his speed either, but um Savant, we need Savant at the minors to get some better measurements there,
Right.
right? A lot of it is his base running ability, right? He's
Right.
he's you know he's a just because of pedigree, right? He grew up with baseball. He knows baseball. His dad himself, people are going to him for hitting lessons, right?
Right.
Because he's top notch when it comes to even instruction. So yeah, he's an extremely high floor player. I'm not sure if I would pay a lot in trading for him
Right.
now that he's quite high. I thought he would be a good FYP last year. The other thing about him, which I think is an interesting exercise, I was trying to think, well, what is his peak going to look like?
Right. I was just about to
And
go
how
there.
does that compare to other shortstops his age that are seen kind of as phenoms? And I just see him as the high floor, but not the ceiling, like compared to a Wit or somebody like that can go 40-40. Uh, he could fill out and go 30-20, but that's based on the big if he fills out. And then the last thing I want to say is I do have one other player at 70 hit, and that's Amador at Colorado.
Mhm.
Um, Amador's BABIP is average. Holidays is over 400, right? So if we're going to apply that across the board, what do we do there, right? I think Holiday's a little faster than Amador, but that 400 is not going to sustain. Um,
See,
he
I would say I would argue that his hit tool is so good. I I wouldn't come close to a 70 with Amador from a hit tool standpoint. And I think Holiday's hit tool is so good that he is able to, he's not just trying to hit the ball hard. He knows where he's hitting the ball, right? And I think that's the
Yeah, but give me a 365 BABIP for that, right? I don't think he could
sure
sustain the
he's
400.
still so his
But
upside to me.
I think Amador has more evidence of all fields. He doesn't strike out as much.
Sure.
His hard hit is underrated. It has improved. Colorado is he's perfect for Colorado in gap to gap hitting.
Mhm.
So obviously I don't have Amador even close to Holiday, but I'm just saying that when people scout these players, and especially in fantasy baseball, um, I think there's a lot of stuff that is attached to Holiday that isn't attached to other players that could contribute to the hype. And I just
Sure.
think we need to be careful with that.
For sure. Number one overall pick in 2022. Father was, a very, very good corner outfielder for a decade. All those things, and a beloved player, right? Like
Uh-huh.
Cardinals, St. Louis loves him, blah, blah, blah. I think Holiday has 30 to 35 home run upside because of his ability to barrel the ball and to hit the ball hard, and because I think he really is going to fill out. Um, I also think that Baltimore lineup is going to be very good, right? For a long time. And so whether he's going to hit first, second, or third likely in that lineup. If he hits first, I think that's different. That looks a little different. I don't expect him to because the speed I don't think is enough at the top of that lineup. I expect probably Gunner to stay there. But say he hits third behind Gunner and Adley. Say he hits second and he's hitting behind Gunnar and in front of Adley, right? For me, there's pretty immediate 180 runs plus RBIs and pretty immediate 20 to 25 home runs with at minimum double-digit steals. And that's like from the get-go, right? And then from there, and that's you're talking about already probably a top, I don't know, let me bring up when I look at shortstops, you're slotting him in now above, above Swanson, below Witt, below Lindor, depending on how you feel about Seager's speed and durability, probably below Seager. But there aren't a whole lot of other, below Trey Turner, there aren't a lot of other guys on this list. He's already above Abrams, right? He's already above Adames. He's already above Bichette, Bogarts, Crawford, Swanson. So if you put him there immediately at 21 years old, in my mind, if he gets to 30 plus home runs, he may not have the speed of Witt, but he might have Witt's batting average by 50 points. He might hit 310 and Witt might hit 260, right? And he might be in a lineup with a whole bunch of hitters, whereas Witt has nobody in that Royals lineup around him to drive him in or for him to drive in. So while I think Witt is a more explosive player, I don't know that. I think Holiday is the better play ultimately. And I also think that, Seager's going to be 30. Lindor is going to be 30, right? You've got these guys who are starting to be on the downside of their careers. Trey Turner is going to be 31. So who's going to take that mantle? I think that Holiday is a sure bet to be a top 5 shortstop almost immediately. And I think he has the talent and the bat to truly be a superstar. I'm much higher on him than you are. If you had to ask me, would I rather have Holiday or Witt long term? It'd be a hard decision for me to make. It might be what does the rest of my roster look like kind of conversation, because Witt may have more steals, but Holiday might have him with everything else across the board. So I don't know. I love him. When I did my initial minors ranks for dynasty ranks for this off season, I did have him at 1. I probably will keep him at 1 for now. 2, I think we're probably going to start to get into it even at 2. Who do you have at 2?
There's one other thing I want to say as far as Holiday goes,
Sure.
as far as how his value could be upped when it comes to being in the top 20, is that move to second base, right?
Sure.
So he can man second base, number 1 second baseman for 10, 15 years easily.
Yep.
And it would move him easily into the top 20 for just that position there. I think shortstop is obviously always a lot more competitive when it comes to rankings, but I see his value. And if I were to try to acquire him, and if he's playing second base in spring training, or if they're moving him around a lot in spring training, that would be an indicator to me. Well, maybe I should pay high for him.
Right. So very different players when you look at them at face value. But you think about Simeon last season, 122 runs, 29 homers, 100 RBIs, 14 steals, 826 OPS, right? That's kind of high-end Holiday if you think about it, with that many runs and RBIs and almost 30 home runs. Ozzy Albies, 96 runs, 33 homers, 109 RBIs, 13 steals, 849 OPS. So I think it is a case of, in some ways, we want these minor league guys to be superstars. And when you take a look at the old guys that are kind of, you get bored of or aren't as exciting, you realize that they're still really good. And what you're wishing upon a Jackson Holiday, and the upside of a Jackson Holiday still indeed may be whatever that top 3, top 4 player is right now. Mookie Betts had 39 homers, 126 runs, 107 RBIs, 14 steals, and a 987 OPS. Do you think Holiday will ever reach that?
No,
likely no, right?
He won't surpass Betts, no.
Right.
But I think he could easily surpass the other 2,
right.
Albies and Simeon. Albies just because he's better, I think, and Simeon just because of age, right?
Right. Right.
So,
All right. You
yeah,
want to move to two?
sure, yeah.
What do you got at two?
I got Marcelo Meyer at 2.
Ooh, here we go. Okay.
And here's the reason. I hesitate. There's players that I think are going to have a higher ceiling, and I hesitate. I agree with you, and we've talked about this a lot. I want 5 categories out of shortstop. He's
Sure.
not going to give me the highs of the all 5 categories, right?
Mhm.
I think he is overlooked. I think there's prospect fatigue there. If you just look at talent, bat speed, um, and how he was scouted and how he continues to be scouted. I think there's injury concerns there, but also if we're going to underscore the injury thing, I think the injuries have affected his performance. So he's to me he's the Bogarts without the steals early, right?
Sure.
I think he's that high floor shortstop, and I could see him if there's like a somebody that's going to break out to where we expected him to be this year. It would be Mayer, just because he's healthy now, and this is the year he takes a step. So
Right.
I have no problem placing him there. I think when he is healthy, I think we could kind of track his stats when it comes to hard hit OPS, based upon his injury record. When he is healthy, he rakes,
Sure.
and he has that. You know, he doesn't have the famous dad, but he grew up in a baseball environment, right? So he has that. He has the it factor when it comes to what you want out of a shortstop and a team leader.
Right. Uh, I have him at 7. I've really lowered him from where I had him say last year. I agree, injuries certainly hurt him last season. His stats were pretty bad. 236, 306, 739 OPS, high A and double A. Um, at this point in time, I need to see it, right? You're now 21 years old. You were the former 4th pick overall. I need to see it more so than you've shown. B, at his peak, you're still getting what, 5, 10 steals at most, but probably more like 5. And so even if he hits 290 with 25 to 30 home runs, which is like the absolute best case scenario for him, right? And he
Mhm.
has probably 90 runs and 100 RBIs, and he's hitting third for the Red Sox. You're still not getting anything from a fantasy standpoint, anything from a steal standpoint. And that, when you compare him to other players on this list, that just kills me, right? I can't rank him that high because I'm not getting 5 categories from him. And 5 categories are too easy to get at this position nowadays. The other part is he ran a 24.3% strikeout rate last season in high A and double A. And if your pedigree is, a former 4th overall pick, and you're supposed to be a middle of the order uh, left-handed hitting shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, I don't like that. It doesn't mean he's going to strike out a ton in the majors, but I don't. That's not a good sign, right? So I've seen comps of like Corey, a worse hitting Corey Seager. We talked about, I think, even a year and a half ago, about him being a left-handed Xander Bogaerts. But what actually was Xander Bogaerts at his peak? Or what is Xander Bogaerts at his peak? Where do you rank him among shortstops?
Just a safe high floor shortstop, right?
Totally, and probably somewhere between like 5 and 8,
Hmm.
or 4 and 9, something like that. So for me, I'm finding myself, I understand Mayer's floor, and I think he does have a high floor. But when I'm thinking about investing in a young player and wanting to have that young player on my dynasty team, I'd rather have the higher upside and then be able to deal for the high floor guy if the high upside guy doesn't work out. So for me, Mayer is at 7. I have him 55 hit, 55 power, 50 run, 55 field. So he's really down. His tools are less than what I think I thought they were. I might have given him a 60 hit, 60 power heading into last year. But the longer he goes without playing, producing in the minors and being close to the majors, the more I think he's just kind of an average player.
Hmm.
Uh, anything to
Yeah,
add?
and I'm a little more forgiving of the stats just because he has done well in high A, and this was his initial um
Introduction.
start in double A, right?
Sure.
So I'm willing to forgive those 169 at bats. Yeah, so I'm not gonna, I think you kind of preface this section with this is where the controversy starts because
Sure.
for me, I have Holiday and then a huge line like, what do we do here with these other players? And
Sure.
the other thing I didn't say from the start too, I think shortstop is to me an indicator of where um, prospects are going to go. I think we've had an overload of prospects the last, 3, 4 years based on COVID, based on teams promoting, players quicker, just based on the talent pool. I think the talent pool is going to kind of even out the next couple of years, and we're starting to see it in shortstop, which is usually a strong position.
Mhm.
Um, there's depth here, but there's not the usual strength here after we have Holiday.
Agreed.
So I think we'll kind of have some weird picks here between 2 and 10, or seemingly weird picks, right?
Sure. I guess, less consensus or less conventional, which you can, whoever has the biggest bullhorn or whoever was recognized by, on Twitter and then hired by whomever is the one who gets to build what the consensus thought is. And yeah, we kind of have our own perceptions, right? Or our own observations and scouting and do this on our own without, I think, taking into account what others are saying at quite as much, which is why you see us rank players differently, I think, than what we see on some of those lists. I have Jordan Lawler at, speaking of consensus, I have Jordan Lawler at 2.
Mhm.
Shortstop prospect, Arizona Diamondbacks. I have his risk as high. He's one of 3 high risk shortstops in my top 10. He was the 6th overall pick in that same draft with Mayer. Both Mayer and Lawler were rumored to go potentially number 1. Lawler made it to the majors last year for a quick uh, cup of coffee. He played third when he came up. He was in double and triple A last season. Uh, he is the probably towards the top of this list, the power speed guy. He's faster than, say, Holiday or certainly than Mayer. I don't, he's not my favorite prospect in the world, but he's close enough in proximity and he has the pedigree to say that, it's a guarantee he's going to get an opportunity for a couple of years to play for the Diamondbacks. And that to me is worth something, right? We know for sure he's going to play with the Diamondbacks. We know for sure he's more talented than Geraldo Perdomo, meaning he's probably going to play short and be eligible there. I have his power as a 60 and his run as a 65. So if you just, and hit tools a 55, but if you just take those tools and the opportunity, he could be 1530 or 2020 pretty much off the bat. You might have to live with some lower averages and things, but I think that he's a high ceiling, low floor player, but in the short term, his floor is actually higher because of the opportunity. So I have him at 2. He's not my favorite shortstop prospect. I think the 3 after him, I would probably take above Lawler, but I think the smart ranking is to put him here um, because of the proximity and the opportunity.
Mhm. Yeah, I have him at 4.
Mm.
Um, Kind of around this tier of the next 4 guys.
Mm-hmm.
What I really do like about him is we do have measurables with his speed. So he's at 99 percentile last year in the few appearances he had in the majors. Um, he's going to stay at shortstop.
Mm.
He's a great fielder. In that sense, the defense is going to give him the opportunities and those opportunities can play out, especially, in with steals. He has been criticized with kind of some of the under the trunk stuff as far as hard hit goes, but there's nothing like that yells caution here, right? So his contacts at in AAA was at 74. His zone contact was at 82. His chase was at 20, which is good. But his average EV was 86. His max AV is 108, which isn't really stand out. And the other thing that gives me a little caution about him, I think all of these indicators are consistent. There's nothing to be concerned about, but there's nothing that jumps out because he's playing in Reno, right?
Right.
Reno is he should have better performances at Reno, even with the metrics, right? With the way the ball moves, comes out there. So I think why I don't have him as high as others. I just think his place in Arizona. Arizona is getting a lot of focus now, and also the defense. He's scouted as that solid shortstop that's going to be there for a long time, and that's great for Arizona Diamondbacks fans. But how good is it for fantasy baseball? But for me, why I like him and why I have him certainly in the top five is that speed. And there's nothing that is going. He's not going to be like a hack that barely gets on, right? He's going to have opportunities to run,
Right.
and he's going to have that power. I could see him going 15, 20 home runs and getting over 30 stolen bases. So that's the ceiling I think you were talking about.
The safety in law, like even though I have Lawler's risk as high, and I don't believe that he's a superstar, there is the same safety that there was in Anthony Volpe's season last season, I think exists with Lawler, in that they can show up and go 15-15, right? They can literally just show up on the baseball field, hit ninth, and go 15-15. With Volpe, it was 20-20. And I think Lawler has that kind of athleticism and talent. And so that can't go, it can't go unnoticed, right? You have to acknowledge the fact that that's present for him. There are some other shortstops on this list that have that same kind of 20-20 floor where everything else might bottom out, average, OPS, on base percentage, might hit ninth, meaning they score 65 runs and 60 RBIs, but you still get that 20-20 from them. I think Carson Williams is one who falls in that bucket. I think Mason Wynn, depending on what you think, might fall in that bucket to a certain extent. Edwin Arroyo at some point falls in that bucket as well. So that's the argument for me as to why Mayer isn't as high, is there are guys that kind of just, again, appear on the baseball field and they're 15-15, 20-20 off the bat in the way that Volpe was last season. Speaking of Wynn, I have him at 3. I have his risk as mid. He played in the majors a little bit last season. He really did flop when he was up in the bigs. He spent his minor league season in AAA. He's 22 years old, 498 at-bats, 18 homers, 17 steals, 8.8% walk rate, 16.7% K rate. I have his power and his hit both as a 55 and his speed as a 60. The reason I have him at 3 and above a lot of other really good, what I consider really good prospects, is he was a pitcher for a long time and a two-way player. And I think you see those players develop their offensive skills slower, right? Or at a slower pace. And B, there's so much athleticism in Mason Wynn. He threw a ball across the diamond at 101 miles an hour from short. And his sprint speed last season with the Cardinals, according to Savant, was 92. He's just starting to come into his power. He's just starting to fill out at 21. I think there is a ceiling there that's much higher than people are willing to acknowledge. And I think the Cardinals, for as much as I don't like the organization, they create really high floors for talented players, right? And I think Mason Wynn falls in that category. To me, he's got the athleticism to go, 15 to 20 homers and 30 to 40 steals. Now, where does he hit in that lineup this season? Probably ninth. Maybe moves up a little bit. Is he going to be a one or a two hitter? You would hope so, but I don't know if that ever really does come to fruition for him. And that hurts his counting stats. But I really like Mason Wynn as a player. This is more of a skills play and an athleticism play than it is seeing it right now. This is more of a prediction than anything else, but I like Mason Wynn a lot.
I have him at 3 as well. I have him above Lawler, largely because of what I see metrics wise. So even if we can, we have the AAA stuff now for under the hood. So, his contact rate is 8% above Lawler. His zone contact is at 88%, which is nearing tops or elite, right? I get concerned if it's over 90, but if it's in the high 80s, that's a good indicator. His chase rate is higher than Lawler's, but I don't buy the chase rate thing, especially with hitters who are coming into their power. He's at 28%, which is perfectly fine, right? I think I heard the other day somebody ramble off all the MLB players that are above 30% on chase rate,
Right.
and it's a pretty elite list, right?
Right.
So I think we could get a little over cautious when it comes to chase rate. His EV is right around 2% average above Lawler. His max EV, which I like in developing players because it shows that they can't, what power can they get into. So he's the max EV at Lawler's at 108. Win is at 110. Their hard hit is the same. Their barrel's the same. Their launches are perfect, right in the mid-teens. So yeah, and he has to me, I think he has more athletic upside and more gaps to fill developmentally compared to Lawler, which means he has potential to hit a higher ceiling than Lawler. So that's where I have him at 3. If you're on my team, I would keep him.
Really? Is that a strategy play or is that a
You could decide.
so a couple of things that I saw that I liked even in his major league profile where he didn't hit for squat, but he chased at 3.4% below league average. His chase contact was really high, which I think contributes to the low average, right? He was making weak contact because he has really good hand-eye coordination. Chase contact was a 10.3% above league average. I'm sure they're working with him on hunting his pitch and not chasing. His first pitch swing percentage was 19.7%. League average is 29.6, so almost 10% below league average. Clearly trying to be patient and take pitches. And his whiff percent was 21.6%, which is 3.2% below league average. So you're talking about a high contact hitter who's growing into more athleticism in an organization that I think is very good at teaching the philosophy of hitting, right? They produced really good hitters out of very little talent. And I think Wynn comes to the table with a lot more talent than like an Alec Burleson, right? Or, even a Tyler O'Neill, that kind of guy. I think there's a lot there. Or Lars Nootbaar, right? There's a lot there in Mason Wynn to be molded, and the Cardinals know it. I'm excited. I wanted to rank him above Lawler. I just think that Lawler's his pedigree, and B, the expectations that the Diamondbacks have for him. I think it's easier to see Lawler hitting at the top of that lineup than it is to see Wynn hitting at the top of the Cardinals lineup. And as we know, lineup position matters a ton in fantasy baseball. And if Wynn is always going to be a bottom of the lineup type of guy, it does hurt his value a bit for me. Who do you have at 4? Or you said you had Lawler at 4.
I have Lawler at 4, yes.
So I have Carson Williams at 4. Carson Williams is the Tampa Bay Rays shortstop prospect. He is 20 years old. There's been some talk about him playing in the majors this year. I have his ETA for 2025. He played high A, double A, and triple A last year. 503 plate appearances, 23 homers, 20 steals. He is very much kind of what we talked about with Volpe and what Lawler, could do in his sleep. He's a 2020 type of guy with a low average, right? It's pretty clear that's who he is. He had 257, 356, 853 across those three levels, but he had 31.4% K rate. That's the criticism of Carson Williams, is he's going to strike out a ton. So for a real life perspective, the Rays see a power hitting shortstop with a ton of speed who's going to play plus defense, but not get on base as much as you'd like him to, and he's going to strike out a ton. For fantasy purposes, though, that's actually a really good player, right? I think if you're not able to get an elite shortstop, then this is the kind of shortstop you want who's not going to hurt you. I see at his peak like 800 OPS, 20 to 25 homers, 20 to 25 steals, probably hit 250, 240 to 260 in that range, which sounds better than Wynn and better than Lawler in some ways statistically. Problem is, I don't know what Tampa is going to do with them, right? And so we've talked at length about what the Rays do organizationally with passing out plate appearances. Are they really going to be patient with the Carson Williams if he's striking out at a 35% clip, right? Or do they send him back down for more seasoning, and you never really see him get the 600 plate appearances that you want from your shortstop? So there's some hesitation, I think, from a talent and an upside standpoint. He's the lowest of my top six, but I do think that he is a 2020 guy, and that's what we will eventually see from him. What do you think about Carson Williams, and where do you have him on your list?
I have Carson Williams at 5. And I affirm all that, what you said. My biggest caution is the Tampa Bay thing. I think sometimes, just in what I'm reading, there's assumptions that he is going to be that 600 plate appearances guy at short. And I'm not sure with with Tampa what they do. And even if you look, they're kind of at the savant level of their starting defense, right? So if they see that their pitcher on the mound is going to produce statistically 2 ground balls to short, they're not going to play a defensive short that day, right? They go into that amount of detail. So it's tough to be, unless you are a Caminero, somebody that is elite, or has the potential to be elite. It's tough to say how much Tampa is going to commit to their players, right? So so I think there's, like you've quoted over and over, right? There's only 2 or 3 players that get those potential at bats on Tampa, right? And I think that's just going to continue. There is, with Williams's build, with the defense that he offers, why I have him at 5 is I think, and the speed, there is that ceiling, right? That the lights could turn on, and he could move beyond just that 240 2020 shortstop, just because of the organization that he's in, and what they could teach him. He does have that athleticism, I think, to have that a ceiling that may be different than some other, like, lower high floor players like a Brooks Lee, right?
Right. Well, and there's also, a lot of his issues are mental, right? It's plate approach. And he's on as much as I don't like the Rays, he's on a team that's really smart and really good at identifying players' strengths and weaknesses, and being able to build upon the weaknesses and highlight the strengths. And so if there is an organization who's going to get the most out of Carson Williams, I think the Rays are it. I like him a lot. I think that a lot of these guys in this area are very good players, and they're worth having on your dynasty team. I just don't know that Williams presents the ceiling of some of the others necessarily. I get what you're saying about the athleticism. Right now, that strikeout rate is scary to me. It's really, when you're striking out that much as a young player, to me, you typically don't see those players succeed in the major leagues at the level that you would want them to. My number five, since you just gave your five, I'll open this can of worms now. Is Felnin Celesten. Yep, that's right. Let me ask you first, where do you have Celesten?
I have him next. I have him at 6. We're
So
agreeing
we're
more than
close.
we thought.
We're in lockstep. If you didn't have your crazy Marcelo Meyer number 2 rank, I think we'd be right there together. So we can both tackle this one. Felnin Celesten is 18 years old, 6'1", 175. He was signed by the Mariners for $4.7 million out of Dominican Republic. Just explosive. He was the number 2 prospect behind Ethan Salas when he signed. He did get hurt. He had a hamstring strain in an inter-squad game in June, so he didn't put up any numbers in the minors last year. I think people really forgot about him. But man, switch hitting shortstop, it's like if you take a video game and you build a prospect from scratch and you say, okay, he's going to be a switch hitting shortstop. He's going to be lean and athletic. He's going to be faster than everyone else. He's going to be quick twitch, right? He's going to have great hand-eye coordination. He's just going to be the man, right? That's who Felnin Celesten is. So ranking him for me at 5 and you at 6, obviously we're dreaming on a player who hasn't put up any statistics in the States yet. And we tend to be more aggressive with some of these guys. But the reality is, if you take those top, 3 to 5 January international signings each year, there's a lot of certainty that a lot of those players are going to be really good, right? That's where a lot of the major league superstars come from nowadays. And people I think they sleep on that sometimes. So Celesten to me has the highest upside of anyone on this list. And that includes Jackson Holiday, because I think Celesten has the body type and the explosiveness to actually hit for more power than Holiday. Is he going to be a 310 hitter? Who knows? I have no clue. But could he hit 35 home runs with that kind of explosiveness? He can. Can he steal 50 bags with that kind of sprint speed? I think he can. So I don't know. Sky's the limit for him. As a Mariners fan, I'm super excited to see what he can do. It would not surprise me at all if he's the number 1 Mariners prospect going into 2025. Super excited. I will be watching whatever highlights I can see of him this season. He's loaded. Like they described him in Pipeline, they described him as a tool shed, right? Who potentially can be a top 5 prospect in baseball. So super excited. If I had a shortstop, and from a strategic standpoint, if I had a shortstop in place on my team and I got to choose for the next, say, 4 years, say I had a Seager or a Lindor or someone like that who I know is going to play. If I could choose from Lawler, Wynn, Carson Williams, Celesten, I'm taking Celesten over all of them because the upside's higher. How about you? You got the hat and jersey on to represent Celesten today.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious with the moves that Seattle is making, right? What they think of him. So you see on tweets people complaining while they're getting all these mediocre middle infielders, right, in their signings or their trades, from Polanco to Urias and
Rojas.
and others, or Rojas last year. Well, it's just because they're filling in the time. You have Celesten at short, you have Emerson at third, and you have Young at second, right? That's the future. That's 2026, right? With if Celesten is everything we dream of, right? But yeah, I think just on pure scouting alone, he is the prototypical 30-30 shortstop. There's questions as far as speed, but he has the build. Baseball America tends to be pretty conservative when it comes to international players, when it comes to the grading, because they don't really have a lot of information to work off of. But he's already at 50, 60, 60, right? For power speed. And that's a damn good grade for an international player, to be 60 power, 60 speed. So Yeah, and what you said about switch hitting, that's what you want there, right? Um, that's going to give you at bats. He has the arm to stay at short. It seems like Emerson and Young are the ones that are going to move off. And he has a great swing too. It's fun to see him swing.
Yep.
Just in Baseball America's mechanically sound swing, right, from both sides of the
Yep.
plate. Just a solid high ceiling player that I think also has a high floor.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch him this year. He's going to start in Arizona
I
Complex.
assume so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I
so it's gonna, I think we'll both be watching, trying to get clips or see the games. I'm not sure, does minor league baseball TV cover Arizona Complex? I don't think they do.
No, I don't think so. I think it'd be a YouTube sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I have his currently hit 50, power 60, run 65. Obviously,
Mhm.
you want to see that hit tool come up. I don't feel comfortable moving it until we really see him play. But to your point, BA is pretty conservative with those guys, and they're aggressive with Celesten. I think it's interesting too. So he's, according to Fangraphs, he's 18.4 years old. Emerson is 18.5. Ty Pete 18.5. Cole Young 20.5. You've got Farmello 19.4, Aiden Smith 19.5, Montes 19.3. So you've got this huge group of young players, bats coming through this organization, many of which are highly rated. You could see 8 bats, Mariners bats in the top 100 this time next season, right? If
Mhm.
Farmello plays well, if Pete plays well, certainly Montes will be there. The other thing I'm going to say is you can trust when the Mariners spend big, and this is as someone who follows the team like you do, we know this intimately. When they spend big on a prospect, this regime, you can trust, like unequivocally trust their judgment. So from a Rule 4 standpoint, Cole Young, people criticized it, but he's now a top 50 prospect. Cole Emerson, people were, kind of ho hum about it. And now all of a sudden he's like the it name, right? But then you
Mhm.
look at the international signing, start with Julio, right? Obviously, Julio Rodriguez, top 5 player in the game. You move to Gabriel Gonzalez, who they just traded, was their number 4 or 5 prospect, depending on who you ask. Just traded him as the key part of the Polanco deal. Lazaro Montes, right? International signing. You can go down this list and find players who are really, really big prospects, really, really good players. And Celesten is the one who they were most excited about. Celesten is the one who they paid $4.7 million to sign out of the Dominican. So to me, I got this long list of players that they've acquired, young players they've acquired over the last couple of years. And he's the one they're pretty much most excited about, right? In a
Mhm.
very deep organization. So if you
And
follow,
it's even a much bigger signing than Marte was, right?
yeah, big time. I think twice as much. So think about Marte even. Marte was a really smart signing, right? So this is an organization that knows what they're doing. And so when they invest almost $5 million in a player like a Celestin, you got to stand up and notice.
Mhm.
I'm super excited. The 5 rank I think will be too low by the end of this year. Who do you have at
I thought, I
like
honestly thought you were gonna hide him because I know you're gonna try to draft him.
no, I may try to draft him. I don't know yet. I think there's other guys out there, but we'll see. Wink, wink. Who's next? I'll start with, I guess I'll go with my number 6 since that was your 6, right?
Um, yeah, Celestin was my 6, yeah.
I have Sebastian Walcott at 6. Is Walcott your 7?
We did cheat. Yeah, he's my 7th.
That's crazy. Why don't you start? I'm gonna step away for 2 seconds. Why don't you start with Walcott? I'll listen.
Okay, so first answer the question why Celestin is above him, which he isn't on most lists. But even if you go to back to BA scouting, BA has Walcott at 50, 60, 55, and they have Celestin at 50, 60, 60. And Celestin obviously was scouted better out of the international class, why he got all the attention last year. And I think where Walcott got the attention is how hot he started. And again, Walcott's quite young. And he got off to a great start in the minors until until they promoted him quite quickly to higher levels. So I see Walcott as having that potentially having that elite power. There's questions about his strikeout rate overall last year was at 32%. Not what you want to see, but again, this is a 17-year-old, 18-year-old. I think he's still 17. That was producing. I think what draws attention is very similar to Luciano. He hits a crap out of the ball. He's showing elite EVs already at this young age. The question I have about him when it comes to shortstop is where's he going to end up, right? He doesn't have the defensive athleticism that Celesten does. Is he going to move to third? Is he going to move to the outfield? He has a decent arm. He's just one of those. Let's look and see where his ceiling is going to go, especially with the power and his EVs. So that's why I have him there. I think there's a firm line drawn between these international prospects that I have. I have Celesten, Walcott, and then I have Arias next. But there's a big line between Celesten and Walcott and Arias right there.
So I'll start with BP's reckless comp for Walcott is Ellie De La Cruz. And I think I could see, you can see why, right? How athletic he is. You do wonder about a 6'4" shortstop prospect. Will he stay at short? I ranked him at short. I think it's probably, for me, 50-50 right now as to whether he ends up at a different position. BP actually lists his position as DH, which I think is really funny. But he's put up exit velocities of 110 already at 17 years old, right? Which is just bananas. This is the ultimate like high risk, high reward type of thing, where if he does stick at short and he is the kind of hitter that people think he might be able to be, you're looking at a 40 home run shortstop, which is crazy to think about. Then the question becomes, if Celesten and Walcott hit their ceilings, would you rather have the speed from a Celesten or the sheer power from a Walcott? My answer would be, give me the speed and power together, even if the power upside for a Celesten isn't quite what it is for Walcott. But yeah, I think he's incredible. I think he's like kind of the anti-Marcelo Mayer in some ways for me, because there is such upside and it's so exciting, but the floor is so low. Whereas Mayer, I think, is maybe pedestrian to me, but you can count on him being a pretty decent shortstop. Do you have anything else you want to add with Walcott?
Not really, no. I just like the potential there. I think that's a good contrast between a Mayer and a Walcott, as far as a floor player versus an extremely high ceiling player.
One other thing I'd like to add is you have to wonder, if he's 17 and he's 4 years away from playing in the major leagues, how did we think about middle infield and size of middle infielders and who got to play middle infield 4 years ago, right? We were playing during the shift rule or no shift rules. You had Mike Moustakas playing second. You had all this random stuff going on, and then the rules changed. You have to wonder if, like, what's going to happen 4 years from now. So Walcott is 6'4". He's going to fill out. But does baseball and kind of the prevailing thought as far as where you can place certain body types on the diamond, does it change 4 years from now? Could he end up at first instead of third, right? Could he end up in right field like Jordan Walker did? Or does he end up at short because we don't care as much about shortstop defense 4 years from now as we do right now? I think it's interesting to try to project that. And we always apply the present day rules. And I don't know that the present day rules are going to apply 4 years from now. So who do you have at 8?
I have Arias at 8. New York
Roderick Arias, not Gabriel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Roderick, yeah, so I have him at 55, 50, 55 hits, 60 power, 55 run. 55 run is, again, where's that going to end up? He gets the attraction because of he's going to stay at short, right? BA already has him at 60 field, 70 arm.
Mhm.
He could be that solid high floor shortstop for the Yankees for years to come. He performed well last year. He shows maturity at the plate. So his on base percentage was 423 last year, with a 505 slug, so a 928 OPS. He is showing great base running ability. So, 17 steals last year. His walks to Ks, that's where his maturity shows as well. 27 walks, 29 Ks last year. And scouts see his power developing.
Mhm.
He doesn't have the ceiling as much as Walcott or Celesten, but he is, because of where he is going to get a lot of hype attached to him, especially since people will remember him, right? It's just weird with international prospects. They get that initial hype and then everybody forgets about him because they don't have stats,
Right.
right? They don't
Right.
have the stats to be supported, or just minimal stats. So
Right.
so I think he's the safe pick. Why I would draft him late in a dynasty, in a keeper league, is because he's going to get that New York hype, and he's somebody, if he does take off more, you could trade him for a lot, just because he's going to get the New York media attached to him
Mhm.
once he starts establishing himself.
I had him just outside of the top 10. I'm right there with you though. I think if you're that age and that place on the developmental curve and you don't have the upside of a Celesten and Walcott, it's really hard to put you in the top 10. But I think that another season of what he did, or something comparable to what he did last season, and he's certainly square in the top 10. Um, a better bet than some of the others that we've talked about already. I wouldn't say I have a Yankees bias against the Yankees, but it's hard for me to get behind those prospects. And I think sometimes the pressure of being in New York is not for everybody. And he was the number one prospect in the 22 class. He did sign for $4 million, right? There's things about his development that are going to put pressure on him to succeed. I also think he is a very clear player who demonstrates the difference between a fantasy ranking and a real life ranking, because his
Mhm.
defense is so good at short. Um,
Mhm.
I have Mayer at 7. We've talked about him already. Yes, I do have him below Celestin and Walcott. Who is in Arias was your 8?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay, I have Brooks Lee at 8.
Mhm.
I don't know that he stays at short. In Minnesota, he was uh, obviously they have Carlos Correa. Carlos Correa has been a very good defensive shortstop over the years. I don't know at what point he stops being a shortstop because of his size and his age and his injuries, but I'll keep Lee at short for now. Um, Boring to me. Upside is not great. He was the 8th overall pick in 22. He's 22 years old. He'll be 23 years old when the season starts. He played in high or double A and triple A last season. He did put it together a bit. 567 plate appearances, 16 homers, 10% walk rate, 7 steals, 818 OPS. Like, he's kind of a he's your like prototypical high floor, low ceiling shortstop, right? Brooks
Mhm.
Lee at his peak, 280, 290 hitter, low or high teens home runs, probably might get to 20, isn't really going to provide you with any speed. Like a more boring version of Marcelo Mayer, if that's possible. Um, but to a major league team like the Twins, there's tremendous value in a player like Brooks Lee. If he's my starting shortstop in fantasy, I've got problems.
Mhm.
So I think it's important, at least for my list, that I include some higher floor guys as well as the higher ceiling guys. And Brooks Lee is squarely in that high floor area for me.
Mhm.
What do you got?
Yeah, so I have my 9 and 10 as the boring guys. So I have Jackson Merrill at it's 9 and Lee at 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um Again, boring when it comes to fantasy baseball, not real life.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, so he a switch hitter, decent contacts. His hit tool is his highlight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 55, 60, but his
I gave him
power's
60.
50.
Mm-hmm. I gave him a 60,
Power's
60
50,
hit.
his run is 50, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he's not going to give you that standout player. He's always going to be that kind of desperate shortstop you have at the end of a draft that will fill the position, won't hurt you, but he's not going to help you.
Right.
EVs aren't impressive. His average is decent. It's at 90. His max, he gets to 109. His 90th percentile is 102. The other concern is his launch is under 10, and I'm not sure about his ground ball rate, but his launch is showing about 8%.
Right.
Yeah, he's kind of that prototypical Twins hitter, right? He and Gonzalez are going to are kind of similar, right?
Right.
And it's no doubt that I wasn't shocked that Minnesota was asking after Gabriel Gonzalez
Right.
when it comes to the Mariners. So yeah, solid, but not anybody I would necessarily want to invest in when it comes to dynasty or a keeper league. The
Right.
same thing, I think Jackson Merrill gets obviously a lot of press. He's quite high on some lists. I think he remains pretty high on BP. He has been downgraded a bit on Baseball America. Everybody thought he obviously does hit the ball harder than Lee. Everybody thought he corrected his launch angle issues, but he's not necessarily showing that. And to me, I just don't see a projection where he's going to be that high ceiling player that people thought last year. So I'll put him back here. He's not at a very good ballpark either. He may move to second base, that will up his value, but he's not the elite speed, the elite power guy. He has great contact, decent hits it hard, but that he's like to me he's the more athletic Alex Bohm that is if he's in a good lineup, he may do some counting stats, but other than that, he's just going to be the 15 home run, 70 runs, 70 RBI guy.
That's a damning praise, is what that is. If you're a more athletic Alec Bohm, I was thinking like, we talk about Cole Young,
Mhm.
and people are excited about Cole Young. I am too, and I see there's 2020 potential there, right? And a plus hit tool, and everyone's so much more into Jackson Merrill than they are Cole Young. But I think Cole Young is a better fantasy player and maybe a better real life player. It's just that Cole Young was drafted in the 20s, and people have these expectations of Merrill that he's going to be a top 10 player, and he's just not.
Mm.
But it's interesting where you start with your expectations versus where you end up a couple years later is really interesting when you start to compare the raw numbers of what you expect from that player in the major leagues, right? Because Merrill
Mm.
and Young are, I'd say, close. I still would go Young over Merrill, but Merrill is what, 11th on the BP list, right? And a player that people are really excited about. I just don't see it. My 9 and 10 are at 9. I have Ceddanne Rafaela, the shortstop and outfielder for the Boston Red Sox. This is purely a fantasy play over a like real life play. I think he's another one that is going to put up homers and steals in his sleep. Now, what he hits and some of the plate skills are super goofy, right? 5.4% walk rate in double and triple A scares the what out of me. Makes a lot of contact, is our Major league pitcher is going to give him anything to hit if they know he's swinging all the time? I don't know. But in 485 plate appearances, 20 homers and 36 steals. So if a player like Rafaela has the ability to put the ball in play in Boston, right? Whether it's off the wall as a right-handed hitter, off the wall, off the monster, or in that big gap in right center, you can see an outcome with Rafaela where it's 15 homers, 30 steals, top of the lineup, but like an 830 OPS because he's got 35 doubles, 12 triples, and the 15 home runs. I think, is he going to do that? The likelihood is no, but there is that skill set, I think, in his bat and in his athleticism to be able to do it. I also wonder, is he going to actually have a regular position and regular time with Boston, right? That's hard to predict at this point in time. He played some second. He's a plus defender at short. He's played some third. He certainly played in the outfield. He could be their center fielder for the next 10 years. If he gets regular at-bats, I do think that I would move him up on this list because of the speed power upside. I think if he gets regular at-bats, you can get somewhere near Lawler, Wynn, Carson Williams, in fact, because of the athleticism and the explosiveness, and because we're playing fantasy, not reality baseball, right? I like him. It's a blind spot for me, but when your walk rate is that low in the minor leagues, it really gives me pause because you have to wonder whether Major League Pitching will give him anything to hit. But with the bat like Rafaela, you can also ask, does he need anything to hit to put the ball in play and get on base? Because he's the kind of player you could throw it 2 feet outside, he still might punch it into right field. You obviously don't have him on your list, but what do you think about Ceddanne Rafaela in general as a fantasy player?
Yeah, I'm just hesitant as far as where he's going to fit and what Boston is going to do. Roster Resource has Story at short batting fourth.
Right.
We'll see how long that lasts, right? I think Duran is a great sleeper this year. I think he finally can he showed
Roberto?
we're expecting what?
Roberto?
Yeah.
Ezekiel? Which one are we talking about? I know it's not Jaron.
Jaron Duran. They have him listed as leadoff. And from his performance midseason on, I think he's going to stay there. But anyway, I'm saying this because I think shortstop is where he potentially could go.
Sure.
The case, I was looking at him a lot last year as far as picking him up, but the walks of K's just really provided a lot of
It's a bit gross, right?
yeah.
I also think the acquisition of Vaughn Grissom hurt him a ton
Uh-huh.
because he could have played second, right? Or they could have played Story at second and Rafaela at short. The acquisition of Grissom, to me, could be telling for what the organization thinks of Rafaela's bat, right? Because he's a good defender. But if they really believed in his bat, would they have asked for Grissom or would they have asked for something else in the Chris Sale trade? I also would say, though, Grissom's not a shortstop, and Trevor Story's arm is bad and is going to cause problems on that team. He's also injury prone. So what happens if Story either moves to second or is just terrible? Are they going to bring up Marcelo Mayer, or are they going to play a Rafaela there instead, right? I think they would play Rafaela there instead and expect Mayer to be in the majors in late 24, early 25. But I believe in his athleticism and his explosiveness. I'll take him over a Joey Ortiz. I'll take him over a Jacob Wilson. I'll take him over a Brian Rocchio. Those types of guys, I think he has a higher upside than that. Just what's the one stat I need to bring up about Jaron Duran?
Well, for me, it'd be video clip, right?
Sure. The center field defense. No, I was going to bring up the 381 BABIP.
Yeah.
And whether that 381 BABIP is sustainable. Obviously, I don't think it is. To me, he's a plus fourth outfielder and not a legitimate a legitimate center field option, which opens up opportunity for Duran, obviously. My number 10 is, I'm holding on to this. Maybe I die on this hill, but my number 10 shortstop is Edwin Arroyo, the shortstop prospect for the Cincinnati Reds that came over in the Luis Castillo Noelvi Marte deal. I think he is a prospect that isn't talked about and was overshadowed by Marte, but yet another 2020 guy, right? Potential 2020 sort of guy. Last year he stumbled a little bit with the bat, 252, 324, 757 was his triple slash, 13 homers, 29 steals, 554 plate appearances in high A and double A. But he is hands down the best defender of any of their young prospects, right? Anybody who thinks they can play short, whether it's Ellie or McLean or Marte, Arroyo is the one natural shortstop with the beautiful glove. And I think that ultimately ends up mattering. Switch hitter, he's added a lot of loft to his swing, and I think that's impacted his stats recently, where he was more of a 280 sort of hitter in the past. He's looking more like a 250, 260 hitter, but added some power. But also, he plays in the Cincinnati organization. And so a 15 home run hitter on a different team might be a 22 home run hitter in Cincinnati. I love his approach. I think he's slept on. He's still only 20 years old. He turns 21 in August, right? And at the end of August. So we've been talking about him for a long time because he was a 17-year-old when he was drafted by the Mariners. But the dude can play. And the shortstop defense, I think, carves out a real role on the Reds. I think by the time he gets to Cincinnati, which I have as 2025, they may try to thin the herd a little bit. And, maybe you'll certainly see India gone, but maybe you see a CES get traded or move to left field and Marte be the everyday third baseman. Maybe Marte's in left and Ellie's at third. But I think Arroyo has a spot on that team. And he fits in that same category as Lawler, Wynn, Carson Williams, right? He's a 2020 dude. Some guys have higher potential. The reason Arroyo's at 10 is he doesn't have the 25 home run potential. And he's a little further away and blocked. Whereas Lawler, Wynn, Williams are right at the doorstep of a real major league job and have a little bit more power potential. But I like Arroyo a lot. I like him even more as a real life player, but I think he is super slept on, and will be in my top 100 when we come out with him.
Where do you have his speed?
60, or excuse me, 55.
55.
Mm-hmm. I have a 50 hit, 50 power, 55 run, 60 field. And so again, that's not the same as those other 2020 guys, but I think he's a very skilled player, right? And some of this is from the scouting that I did when he was in the Mariners organization, but a very, very skilled player, a smart player, the kind of player you want playing shortstop, especially around a bunch of other young players, right? There's like obviously this isn't the comp and he's nowhere near this talent, but I think of him like a Francisco Lindor, where Lindor is the general of the team, right? Lindor runs the show. He's the personality. He's a switch hitting shortstop. He's a great fielder. Lindor's 30-30, whereas Arroyo would be 20-20. But I think of him in that same capacity where the team kind of revolves around him in some ways, even though you have these other stars at other positions. I like him. I'm a fan.
Plus, Lindor didn't necessarily come up as the hit tool skill guy. He came up first as the fielding guy, right?
Right, and he was a top draft pick. I think he was 7 overall in that draft, but he wasn't. He definitely didn't have the hit tool, as you said, the hit tool that people came to know, Francisco Lindor as. I still think his hit tool is still a little overrated at times. I think Lindor's a 55, but that is not of importance. I got to look up when he was drafted now. I'm going to be mad if I got that wrong. Do you have any other shortstops you want to talk about or that deserve discussion here?
Um, Not really.
Eighth.
You have the international signings,
He was eighth
this year,
overall.
but what's that?
He was eighth overall in
Eighth overall.
2011. I missed it by one.
You have the international signings this year, DeVries. Um, but you know where where do they end up?
Hmm.
It's a big question. You don't necessarily have a Celesten or an Arias this year. I don't think they necessarily compare. I think DeVries was what 5 million, right? Though
Yeah,
was that?
yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to find out more about him. I just don't have the info on him yet.
He's from what I know, he's athletic. He's a really good defender at short. They think he can grow into some power, but he's not. He doesn't have that 60 power yet at shortstop, which I think this international class is less than the last, is not quite as good as the last couple of them. But we have to, obviously we have to spend more time with these players and to understand them a little better. Uh, I don't really have anyone else either. As I said, Montgomery, Amador, Luciano, Cole Young, Colt Emerson, those are all players who are on at other positions because I think that's where they end up.
Mhm.
The one that I think is right there for me is Arias, but like Ortiz to me is a utility player. Jacob Wilson is trashed. I don't know why Oakland picked him as high as they did. I can't. I seriously like. I see people excited about him, and it's like Stephen Kwan at shortstop. You know what I mean? Maybe. Uh, and then Rocchio, I'm not a huge fan of either. Any other players that deserve consideration from you?
Um, Not really, no. I think what's interesting when it comes to shortstop though
Mhm.
is we thought this was a huge position of depth in the past, right?
Mhm.
And I still remember coming out of COVID, all the debates on who's going to be the number one shortstop when it was Volpe, Mayer,
Right.
the Cleveland guy now, Watson.
Oh, Khalil Watson. Yeah,
Um, and then Hernandez, international prospect.
sure.
Yeah, so it's interesting how all of them, Volpe's graduated. I think he could be decent. Mayer, there's huge questions about, but this idea that this is a depth position just shows kind of the volatility of
Yep.
the minors
Yep.
and how hard it is to especially with these younger players to see where they end up.
It's a little scary when you start to look at it, right? Because Mayer is still in double A.
Uh-huh.
Volpe had a sub 700 OPS. Watson is, got into some trouble and is toiling in the Guardians organization. These were all
Mm-hmm.
guys that we were pretty sure were going to be really good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at this list now, and I think it's for me, it's part of why I do put Lawler and Wynn as high as I do, is they're going to have a job. And
Mm-hmm.
that unfortunately is worth quite a bit. But you're right, not nearly as exciting of a conversation as I thought it might be. Third base was much more exciting to me than shortstop. Um,
Mm-hmm.
from just a player preference standpoint, even second base was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so next week, outfield.
Yes, that should be a little more interesting. At least you have some top players there, and then I think pitching is going to be an interesting conversation too because there's no standout there, but there's a lot of enticing prospects coming up there.
Yep, that's pick your flavor, choose your own adventure right there. Cool, man. So
But
we will be back next week at this time. Baseball and coffee. We'll do the second base major league preview on probably Saturday or Sunday. That should be up. For those who are listening to the Mariners cast, you'll hear more from me about the Mariners. I did the Jorge Polanco trade emergency Mariners cast last night, a Dylan Cease rumors Mariners cast yesterday morning. It's podcast season. We're in it
yeah.
deep right now, man. It's super fun. Real quick before we go, do you have what's your reaction to the Mariners trade of Darren Bowen, Gabriel Gonzalez, Anthony DeSclafani and Jonathan or Justin Topa for Jorge Polanco.
I thought it was a great trade. And I think it exposes what their philosophy is about their core, right? So
Mhm.
that it was Gonzalez, that was the prospect that left, and Bowen, that's where their core is not. And I'm glad they held on to their infielders, who would pass on Marte. Marte was part of the Castillo trade, right?
Correct.
Who would pass on that if you get Castillo? But the fact that they're holding on to that middle of Young and Celestin and Emerson and Montez
And
in the
Pete,
outfield,
right?
yeah,
Pete and
and
Farmello and
even Locklear,
mhm.
you know, so they have their core coming up. I just don't understand what the complaints of some Mariner fans about these trades, right? You have these are brilliant trades because so Polanco he has an option for 25, right?
Team option.
That's perfect. And they were the ones receiving cash on this, right?
No, the Mariners gave cash.
They gave cash. Okay.
So the Mariners gave, my understanding is it's 8 million. So they
8 million.
covered, I think they covered the DeSclafani, the half of the DeSclafani salary that they were responsible for, because the Giants were responsible for half of it. But my
Okay.
understanding is the Mariners still sit at 124 million as their current payroll. So they
Okay.
still have room to add if 140 is going to be their cap.
Okay.
With really, in my opinion, not a whole lot of holes to fill. I
Hmm.
think, I don't know. I thought it was freaking brilliant. You know me, I've been calling for a Polanco acquisition since the trade deadline last season.
Hmm. Well, you had an emergency podcast, so
Yeah. Well, and it
that shows the excitement, right?
fired me up that like this is a player that I feel like identified before damn near anybody else did, that the kind of fit that he would be on this team. And he's gonna slot somewhere between hitting third and sixth.
Hmm.
If they can keep him healthy, I think he's being slept on. I think for our podcast's sake, Darren Bowen is a mid-90s fastball, big sweeper, doesn't have a third pitch yet. I think ultimately is a reliever, would have been a reliever on the Mariners. Maybe becomes a starter on a different team, but he's of value. But it was a 13th round pick that the Mariners produced into a trade chip, right? And then
Hmm.
Gonzalez, I started to sour on him a bit because his profile as a stiff, slower, right-handed hitting corner outfield bat, there's so much that he has to do with the bat to be a major league regular, right? He's got to
Hmm.
be able to hit right-handed pitching. He's got to be able to hit a right-handed slider, and he's got to be able to field at least well enough to play a right field or a left field in Minnesota. And I think all those things are up for question.
Hmm.
Hitting a major league slider as a right-handed bat is not easy, but
Hmm.
because he's so slow and because he is a right-handed bat, I think it puts him at risk as becoming more of a fourth outfield lefty masher type. So I had him really high when we did this, 2 years ago. I think we both had him in our top 50 or right around there. Um, I think he probably lands in the top 100 this year, but probably towards the bottom of it. He is the one prospect on the Mariners list that I would have said in their top 10 that I would have said, I hope they trade him and not the others.
Hmm.
And he doesn't fit their profile, right? They want these athletic, lean, fast, good defender type of players. I think that's what they're working towards at least. And he just doesn't fit that. But
And he told all is right with the world, right? He's totally fits the Minnesota profile. So
right,
yeah.
100%.
And then the other thing too, which I like that, I think we were texting potential lineups last night. I think, and we've both talked about this in detail as well, as far as what the Mariners need to do this year when it comes to their hitting. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they were aware of their strikeout problem, right? And they were aware of that they were going too far to the extreme with hard hit,
Right.
screw the strikeouts philosophy. And if you look at their lineup now, that's comforting that you have. So you have Crawford leading off. He was the best, eye disciplined player last year when it came to to contact. And then you have obviously J-Rod 2, and then you have Polanco probably 3, and he's that, he hits it hard, but good contact. And then you have Garver maybe 4, who also is a disciplined hitter, and not the prototypical Kellenic, right? That
Right.
is to K tons and not show patience at the plate and make decent contact. So I feel so much more comfortable with this. And then you could push Cal back a little bit, and not put the pressure on him. And you could, there's nothing wrong with hitting it hard and striking out, but you just don't want 9 players like that.
Right. And now you've got Raleigh and Rayleigh who both do that, but provide a ton of power. But you've got
Mhm.
France, who's a high contact hitter. Polanco does strike out a bit. It was 25.7% last year, but he walks a ton. He's almost a
Mhm.
15% walk rate 2 years ago, right? And it's just, man, it's just exciting. You look what I said, and I gotta get going after this, but you look at the length of this lineup now, and Rojas was like a 7 hitter before, or a 6 hitter. And now Rojas is at the bottom. And if Rojas can't produce, you put Urias there, right? Haniger, I don't think Haniger is going to play nearly as much as other people think. I think people see the salary and who he was and assume he's a regular every day. I think Haniger plays against lefties and occasionally against righties. I think
Mhm.
Canzone is a much better hitter against right-handers than Haniger is. But you put a Canzone in the 8 hole, right? You put a Haniger in the 8 hole. It's just, you got a long lineup with one superstar in Julio, but a lot of really good players and the best pitching staff in baseball. To me, it's nuts. This is a low 90s win team. I think the floor is high 80s, to be honest, with barring like a bad injury. I haven't been this excited for a Mariners season, I don't know, probably since Griffey played, to be honest with you. And that includes the 2001 team. This is
Plus,
dope.
you have the prospects coming up in the future too.
All of
So
them. Right. And they're all, you've got somebody to play third. By the time Crawford is old, you've got, Celestin will be ready. That's probably 3 years from now. You maybe Young plays shortstop, you get rid of Crawford, and then Young moves to second when Celestin comes up. You certainly have someone to take over for Polanco in 2 years. You got these corner outfielders that eventually are going to be on the way, right? We haven't even talked about Montes yet. And then they're going to draft all pitchers this year, and they're going to restock their pitching minor league system. I'm on fire, bro. I'm so ready for this. This is going to be awesome. Anything else?
that's it. Looking forward to outfield next week, and looking forward to
Pitchers and
getting
catchers.
some news out of spring training and people reporting and stuff, and
Right.
maybe a couple more trades. I think Baltimore needs to make some trades. We'll see what happens with Cease and
Right.
Chicago, and
Right.
yeah.
Good times, man.
All right,
Hey, brother.
take it easy.
All right. You too.